Then we get a second group of men, 430,000 of them at the Canada level, who graduated from high school, but then didn't get any post-secondary and are in jobs that don't demand literacy skill. So they're the most likely to be those skill losers. And then finally, two groups, giant groups, one with almost 2 million and one with over 3 million adults in them. I'll talk about the last group. They have no discernible problem with the mechanics of reading, so their decoding and comprehension skills are great, but they can't get to level 3 on our scales. And level 3 requires you to use conditional information to make inferences from complicated texts. So these are people that in the workplace will not be able to make a decision very easily if the inputs are based on reading about what the problem is. And C, they're at level 2, but they still have some problems with decoding and comprehension. So in thinking, if they were elementary school kids, you'd be thinking about phonics and vocabulary development measures still, even though they're old and in the workforce. So the idea is that we can characterize these learners on what it is they need to learn in terms of their reading performance, and we can also characterize them demographically so that we can put our learning opportunities in the right spots. And a few highlights about that. Almost all of them are employed. So where do you have to train them? Almost all of them hate computers, even though computers are efficient tools for teaching this kind of learner, but they don't like them, so you better take that into account if you're trying to introduce computers into the program delivery, because they have high levels of anxiety. A very small percentage, about 40%, have kids. So family literacy, that's one of the most efficient and effective means of raising adult literacy levels, but they only work if the families have kids. So if you only offer family literacy, you're not going to reach most of where the problem is. So we have a whole series of variables like that that says, here's where what the nature of the problem is and how you'd have to adjust your programs. Okay. So now we have another change of gears. One of the things that I've criticized Canadian policymakers and politicians for is they assume that the problem's going to go away by itself. We're pouring money into education, about the highest level of investment of any of the OECD countries. And so you have to, in the back of your mind, saying, gee, we're spending a lot of money on that, she's going to go away, so I don't have to worry. We've run a set of simulations that test that assumption, and this is the projected numbers of adults by proficiency level for Nova Scotia from 2001 to 2016. Who can tell me what that line is? Flat. This one's a little bit up. So the story it tells you is the absolute numbers of level 1 and 2 people in Nova Scotia is actually going to go up with time, not fall. So if it's an economic problem now, it's going to be an even bigger economic problem in the future. Expressed as a proportion of the population, it stays almost unchanged. I think you drop 1% in the proportion of adults at level 1 and 2. And so if your economic success depends on adopting the most productive technologies of production and the most efficient work organizations, and those depend on literacy, you got 42, 43% of your adult population that won't be able to cope. This is a political chart because it shows the relative ranking of different provinces compared to the national average in 2008 and 2016. Nova Scotia is 4th best here. And you get to be third best by 2016, so a 1 increase rank in that period with the status quo, with your current level of investment and quality and organization of the economy. The question for you is that good enough? Okay, so now this is hot off the press at 11 o'clock. The estimated number of English language learners in Nova Scotia, 240,000 odd. And the distribution, you'll see, the largest number of them are at C. And those are, remember, those are workers in the workplace that have some discernible decoding and comprehension problems still. And then the second largest one is at E, who are people who are at level 3 and need to be at level 4. So it isn't our level 1 and 2 people. And then you have a big number, 22,000, of those I bumped my head men who didn't graduate from high school. These numbers are important because they tell us if this was your literacy was your small business and you have to think about where you're going to sell your services, these are your market segments. This is who you can go after, and this is who your products and services have to be targeted to. We have estimates of the cost of remediation, and so it takes an average of 375 hours to help someone in A1, but it only takes an average of 40 hours to help someone in D, E, or F. So the costs per learner are wildly different, and those turn into differences in the distribution of costs and benefits. That's the French data, only 600 learners. So this is visually the estimated size of the markets in English Nova Scotia and French Nova Scotia. So you don't have to be too much of a statistician to say almost all your problem is in C, D, and E in both English and French.